Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. As we always do, we're breaking down the basics of all political issues so that you get to decide. My guest today is a professional crowder. And what does that mean? Well, you've just seen him making the media rounds because his company produces crowds, and he turned down a $20 million payday to organize an anti-Trump rally. Adam Swart is the founder and CEO of Crowds on Demand, the nation's largest protest and demonstration firm. He's worked across the political aisle organizing events for both liberal and conservative causes, which gives him a rare insider view of just how modern movements are actually made. As a firm believer in free speech and peaceful activism, Adam is now speaking out about how demonstrations are increasingly being weaponized by billionaires, foreign actors, and political elites to manipulate media narratives and public opinion. How timely is this conversation? Adam, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on Politically Basic.
Kyle, it is fantastic to be on your show. Good afternoon to you and to your listeners.
Thank you, sir. Well, you have just been literally making the mainstream legacy media rounds because your company turned down a pretty serious, very high dollar offer having to do with Trump. Why don't you tell us about that? What happened?
Well, sure, and it's interesting because we turned down a lot of stuff, but it's always weird what actually gets headlines and what doesn't. But I guess this thing got headlines because we turned down a $20 million contract. And the contract was to organize the July 17th protests, right? And I want to be very clear because there's a little misinformation circulating is that it was wealthy interests that contacted us, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, well, the organizers who specifically, and I said it's wealthy interests kind of aligned with that movement in general who contacted us, right? So, but the problem is that, and I'm not a MAGA person or anything. I have no qualms with doing certain things to kind of highlight issues that I might have, that people have with the Trump administration. But my challenge with this whole thing was this is just noise. It's not it's not going to actually help anybody better understand the issue. There was no nuance. It was just, let's demonstrate in the street saying we don't like Trump, as people have done for the last 10 years, as Trump has only gotten more popular and more power, right? So it's like, well, if you're going to do the same old thing, I just don't want to be a part of it. I'm a professional, right? There's a reason why George Clooney doesn't do an Avengers movie. It's because he's a professional. He's not going to do a superhero movie, even if they pay him a lot of money. And I'm kind of the same way, where it's like, I don't really want to do just the same old. I want to do something that has nuance and that has insight and that has persuasion. And that's kind of why I respectfully said no in this particular instance.
Well, it takes a lot of integrity to just turn down $20 million. So good on you, Adam. And I want to back up and explain this whole world to my listeners, because I think before you started popping up on the scene, we have heard about paid protesters or people putting Craigslist ads out and trying to get people to show up to rally or to protest. But this is a very legitimate, serious, sounds like big business. How did this all get started for you? How did you think of Crowds on Demand, and what led you to get it going?
Well, sure. Well, this business is 13 years old, if you can believe it. I started this business when I was in college, so I'm 34 now. So the crazy thing is about this whole business is it's really evolved in the last 13 years. So we started it on very different parameters. We started as kind of more of a marketing agency, then we expanded to politics, then we expanded to kind of business disputes, business PR, PR stunts kind of thing, and then we kind of started to do full-fledged advocacy campaigns where we kind of start a movement from the ground up, and do protests, but we also start advocacy groups and everything else. So it's really grown, blossomed, although albeit there have been a few storms on the way of blossoming. And one of my kind of big priorities in this current era where there's just so much misinformation, disinformation surrounding what we do, part of why I have been popping up is not a coincidence, is that I like to set the record straight on two particular aspects of our business, right? Number one, there's misinformation that we engage in any form of violence or law breaking. That's not true. We only do peaceful protests, respectful protests, law abiding protests, right? No vandalism, blocking off roads without a permit, whatever, right? And number two, it's to kind of have people understand the sort of ethics of what we do and understand that what we're doing is actually compensating people who are already in line with the subject matter to show up and express their views. We're not really trying to manipulate. So to better kind of understand what it is we do. So that's the reason that I'm here today.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. And I'm happy to offer you a platform to continue to set the record straight. Let's talk about these people that you help connect up with causes they already believe in. It actually reminds me of, I believe it was an app that got started several years ago that would connect people who were interested in community service opportunities that had to do with causes they cared about, and they were just connecting the dots for them. So sounds like that's kind of what you're doing. People are either on maybe the left or the right or one particular side of an issue, and you are offering them opportunities to show up and be a body, be a voice, be a sign holder to essentially create the perception of majority in these crowds. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything except slightly that last part because no, the way that I look at what we do is we're a catalyst, right? So when you create a movement, when you're trying to create a movement, you need people and you need publicity, right? People bring you publicity and publicity brings you more people, right? So if you never have that catalyst, then you'll never get off the ground. Right. And there are a lot of amazing movements that never have that catalyst and never get off the ground. And conversely, though, you're not going to be able to, you can't make fetch happen, right? Like Jeb Bush tried to do this, right? In 2016, he tried to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. He succeeded in one way, right? Everybody knew who he was, but he didn't win because the people who everyone who voted in that primary knew who he was. They just decided he wasn't for them, right? Conversely, something like the Tea Party, where there was a lot of money behind it from the Koch brothers and other very wealthy conservative billionaires, they were able to build a movement. If they hadn't funded the movement, if they hadn't hired publicists, if they hadn't done everything that they did to get it visibility, it wouldn't have ever had the chance to grow, but it grew because it resonated with the people. So what Crowds on Demand does is we create that catalyst, right? We drive the people there, we create the attention, right? We do something clever, and ultimately the hope is that it catches on. We've done a lot of movements where it's caught on, and we've done some movements where it hasn't.
Yeah. I think what's so fascinating to me about this is we never really have stopped to think about the psychology behind a crowd, right? You probably think about this all the time. This is what your business model is built on, is that having a group of people and other people seeing that, it triggers something in them. It means something. And, if all of these people believe this certain way, well, maybe they're onto something. And I mean,
maybe let me give a second look to it, I guess is what I would say.
Sure.
We're sheeple, right? Like I just actually went to a restaurant last night, and it was actually terrible. I went there because a lot of people had said it was quite good. And I took someone out there last night, and I was like, well, I have to try this place. It's like very, very well reviewed. A lot of people are there, and it was just awful, right? But if it weren't for that catalyst of hearing about it, I would have never tried it. But I'm not going back, right? Well, I guess the way that I would look at what the movements that we build is kind of through that lens. Yes, you can get people to take a look, right? You're gonna get your movement visibility, but then it comes time that the movement has to have some actual element that resonates.
Right. Well, that's why Yelp became such a thing. It's why restaurants seat people in the front windows instead of in the back of their restaurant. We are made human by relying on the output of other people and other people's opinions. And it's why also that this rally attendance became such a focus of
Yeah.
recent political elections, particularly the presidential election, so much so that it started turning out images that many people were claiming were fake or AI, such as the outside of, I believe it was Air Force One with Kamala Harris and the people in the hangar waving to her, and people had, triple length long arms or like white eyeballs, or people, if things looked weird, and people were accusing them of utilizing AI to manufacture the perception of a crowd when there might not have been one. So it's becoming certainly more of a focus, I would say, politically. Maybe you would agree with that, and you're seeing that in your work.
I mean, and in fairness, I give the credit or blame to Trump. I mean, that no one has made a bigger deal of crowd size than Trump, because and I actually disagree with it, whether it's from Trump or from Bernie Sanders or whoever has like made a big deal of it, because I actually believe the vast majority of Americans have never been to any sort of political rally or protest at any point in their lives ever, right? And that's an amazing thing, by the way, because I think a prosperous society, people don't actually have to go out there to voice their opinions because they're just focused on living their life. So I actually don't interpret that as a bad thing. But I mean, you have you have people who are populists, right? Like, I'm not using populist as a derogatory term, but Bernie Sanders, Trump, AOC, whatever, that consider themselves populists. They put a huge element of like, oh, a lot of people were at my rally, so therefore I'm popular. When actually the people who are at your rally are actually just a very small subset of society, right? And you don't 100% know why they are there or not there, right? There's a lot of incentives, a lot of reasons why people come to rallies other than agreement with the cause, right? So that is to say, there's this huge emphasis on crowd size, and then converse, like whether it's a rally or a protest, of like, okay, as if that is some barometer of the national mood, right? When it's actually like has nothing to do with the national mood, right? So at the end of the day, the crowd size matters in the sense of crowd size gets media eyeballs and social media eyeballs and gets people looking at something, but crowd size does not equal public sentiment,
Sure.
right? And I'll actually give you a great example of this. You're familiar with the Squad, right? The far left members of Congress who kind of affiliate themselves that way. Well, a number of them have actually been primaried by moderate Democrats. So, what was her name? Cori Bush from St. Louis, and this other gentleman, Jamal Bowman from New York, right? They both had, millions of social media followers, and they were both primaried and defeated by people who had less than 10,000 social media followers, right? So the way that I look at rallies, and I mean, in a way I'm speaking ill of my own business, but I'm not, and we'll get to why it doesn't matter, but is that crowd size does not equal public support. Crowd size is a vehicle to get attention for a cause,
Yeah.
right? And only stupid politicians think that crowd size means that this is how the people think. Crowd size only indicates how the people who showed up to that crowd think.
Well, and wasn't it fascinating, though, in this last presidential election cycle, that the Democrats thought that they could get some positive effect by manufacturing those crowd sizes by having people like Beyonce or, these other celebrities who people just thought were going to perform and didn't, and they were disappointed. By bringing people to these rallies and events in that way, which backfired, of course, but in their minds, they didn't understand what you understand, that is not going to win them votes or change hearts and minds. It's just going to get people in the door.
It is true, Kyle. I've actually only made one political donation in my entire life, and that was actually to get a concert ticket. It was 2012. I wanted to see Stevie Wonder. My mom always wanted to see Stevie Wonder, so I saw that Barack Obama was hosting an event, like a rally in LA, live at Staples Center. with Stevie Wonder, John Bon Jovi, Katy Perry. Like, I mean, it was like a A-list lineup. I was
Yeah.
like, this is actually like a steal to make this donation to then be able to see all these people. So I'm like, but I'm unfortunately on this list. It's the only political donation that I've ever made in my entire life to any candidate, I'm pretty sure, and it was to this, and I'm on the Democrats mailing list, and I'm like, I literally just wanted to go see
Yeah.
Wonder with my mom, and so I can't ever get out of that.
Oh boy.
Because once you're on the list, you're really on.
Yeah, there's some metaphor for being a
Either part.
Democrat in there somewhere, Adam. I don't know.
Yeah.
You can check in, but you can never check out, or something.
Yeah,
I don't
true.
know.
That's true.
I don't know.
Probably the case for both sides.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this money in politics has also just become
Oh, yeah.
become crazy. But you're right that the draw of the people, right? Where what I would like to see more candidates do, Kyle, is go out on the street corner and meet people who have no idea who the hell they are, and just sort of come up to them and say, hi, here it is, I'm this person, right? But even then, when they do that, they often will pay a crowd to stand around them, because then that attracts more people. If it's just some random person coming up to you, shaking your hand, you might not do it. But if there's crowds, I mean, we started this business sometimes doing like events for like low tier celebrities, where we'd have like paparazzi like following them around and stuff, to make it seem like they were a bigger deal. But again, it's just the context, right? Like what we do at Crowds on Demand is we give people the right context to essentially be their best selves, right? Whether it's that, whether it's a company trying to like make a splash at a convention, whether it's like a campaign, an advocacy campaign that's trying to like raise awareness about a particular issue. That's kind of what we really do. Ultimately, if the company is no good, if the person's not interesting, if the candidate's no good, if the cause is no good, it's going to have a limited effect. So there's this like kind of thing of like, oh, this guy, this business, it's manipulating people. My thing is, actually, you're giving me too much credit when you say I manipulate people, because what I do is I get people to pay attention, and maybe the part that gets their attention is manipulative, but it doesn't really change election results or anything like that, because ultimately people are, that just makes sure that people pay attention and then make their own decisions from there.
Well, it's effective marketing, right? I mean, we do this in a different capacity in so many different ways in this country. But I do want to touch on the ethical component of this, because, you know, you guys, you create crowds, you populate rallies, but you also populate protests, right?
Oh, yes.
And this is the thing that has really has the most potential to go off the rails, to become violent, which you've already said very clearly you certainly do not advocate for. Obviously, that's not your intention. How do you handle that? How do you approach this from an ethics standpoint and safeguard these groups of people? Because as you know, again, talking about the psychological piece of this, large groups of people have a tendency in certain circumstances to get pretty hyped up, and that can go in a different direction than what you intend. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit, Adam.
Well, yeah, you make kind of two interesting points. There's the ethics, and there's also sort of the practicality, the safety considerations, right? So in regards to the safety part, right, that's somewhat a qualitative judgment of like, but based on my 13 years of experience, I can get a sense of, all right, gonna hit the fan here versus this is probably going to be fairly innocuous, right? And of course, you're not going to get it right 100% of the time, but I can generally sense, hey, this is going to get pretty tense. So there are two things we can do when I think something is going to get tense. Number one is higher security, which sometimes we'll do, right? And that will be to fulfill two functions. Number one, to separate us from if there's like a counter demonstrator situation, or maybe there are people on the same side who could be raucous, right? Like obviously we might do that. And also to convey to authorities, hey, we're like a separate group from these wackadoodles, right? And then the second issue, the thing we might do is just decline, right? So in a lot of cases, more recently, I've been saying no a lot, right? And we've gotten a lot of press for saying no. And that's okay. because as a business owner, it's actually smart to say no if you think it's gonna be if you think it's gonna get out of hand. And it's not even a matter that the people who are requesting from us like want us to do violent things. I think people know that that's something we don't do. It's more that if you're doing a protest in a very, very sensitive place where right next to you might be someone throwing a Molotov cocktail, it's very hard for authorities to distinguish between who is holding a sign and who is throwing that Molotov cocktail. So, from my perspective, I'd rather just kind of decline. What I tend to do is if I generally agree with what they're trying to do, is I tend to offer alternatives, but that are maybe a little bit more nuanced and interesting, because I tend to really like to do I'm a contrarian by nature, so I like to do things asymmetrically. I like to focus on an aspect that no one else is focusing on. Like, for example, this Epstein stuff, I pitched to some clients. I'm like, why has no one talked about Les Wexner, right? Everyone wants to like yell at the White House or yell at Congress or the Attorney General, but I want to hear from Les Wexner, right? Who was Epstein's benefactor for most of his years, right? Nobody is talking about that. I like to take on totally like something where I'm advancing a narrative that is not being discussed, right? Like, I would be like, put protesters outside Les Wexner's house, his office, and be like, we demand you tell us what you know about Epstein, right? Like, come on. Like, but that's just a hypothetical example of like the type of thing that I would be attempting to do. I don't want to just do what everybody else is doing. I have the power to summon protesters to do anything. So why would I not want to focus them on something like the most unique, interesting narrative, nuanced narrative in a broader conversation?
Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense. And you've told us there are powerful forces at work here outside of what you do. People on the left and on the right who are wanting to fund these kinds of efforts and rallies and protests. What about foreign interference in this space? Is that happening? Where is it happening? What are you seeing in your work having to do with foreign actors?
Well, unfortunately, it is happening, and there's one primary reason that it is happening, right? So, people from abroad look up to the United States, right? A lot of people are like, oh no, they don't. They hate America. No, they don't. They love the freedoms, particularly in autocratic countries. We think we're divided, that we're wherever. Like, Americans talk their own country a lot, but we're actually an amazing country and a beacon of hope around the world, right? And that's a beautiful thing. So when people in China or Russia or Venezuela or Cuba or whatever, right, are like, well, we shouldn't be starving. We should be asking for like a high standard of living. We should be asking for the freedom to say what we want, right? What these countries, their leaders are very scared. They don't want that. So what they do is they would rather paint America as a bad place. So what they want, they love to show on their state TV and now actually on social media within their country that, oh, America is actually divided. America is there's police tear gassing people, there are protesters looting, right? So they want to show this very dark picture about America so that their people won't aspire to the same standards that we have, right? So protests, but mostly riots can be used to essentially advance this, right? So, and it's not that hard for them to do because we're a free country, right? So all these countries have a network of 501c4s, of dummy corps, right, by which they can easily hire people, pay people, with a degree of plausible deniability to, throw bricks, throw Molotov cocktails, whatever, which they know will inspire kind of a negative response from the authorities, and then will get them the videos that they're looking for to be able to display, right? Because again, the goal is for the people on the streets of wherever those countries are to basically be like, oh wow, our country isn't so bad. Even in America, this is how the police treat the people, you know?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, let's talk about some of those those riots, actions and groups that started off peaceful, that the media called peaceful. But we're here. We see what's happening. And of course, some media outlets are reporting it. So there were the LA riots that we've had recently, not new to LA, sadly. About every 15, 20 years, we get some real fired up ones. And then the ones that you mentioned, we have the No Kings protests, right? Now, here in my community, we had actual peaceful ones. I think most of them were pretty peaceful. I've actually, Adam, never seen a rally or protest that ended itself by being so contradictory. They're protesting Donald Trump being a king on the day that we celebrate not actually having a king in America. However, what's your take on these riots that have turned violent, particularly in LA with the ICE raids and what's going on there?
Well, a lot of that is and number one, I greatly support the right of anyone to demonstrate peacefully for any issue, even if I find it horribly offensive. So, number one, I think it's critical that we distinguish between people who are violent and people who are peaceful, even within the context of the same rally, right? So, like, if we dissect the LA, what happened in LA with the ICE, right? Like, you could totally be someone who has qualms about what ICE is doing, right? But is not, and is demonstrating, but is not violent, right? And there were many. And there were obviously agitators as well who were, obstructing law enforcement, who were breaking things, right, who were wearing tactical gear, very, very dangerous, right? A number of those people are being paid, and how do we know? Is because they have, again, they have money, they have tactical gear, they have legal resources behind them when they get arrested. Most of the violent people are paid agitators. By who is the tough part, because it's hard to pin down the money trail, and because I don't want to get sued, so I can't name people that I do suspect are behind it, because I can't prove it. But there are certainly individuals and entities that I strongly have suspicion are funding it in some way, to foment chaos. And that is a problem. I think that people shouldn't put everybody with the same brush, though, I think we need to be judged as individuals. Like, if you're holding a sign, it's not your responsibility that somebody is breaking the law next to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the law. I think that's just such an important component here, because when things do start to ramp up, and again, as you're saying, we have an enmeshment of people who are protesting, whether they're upset or not or whatever. They're being paid to be there. They're there on their own volition. There, you have this mixture of people who are peaceful and keep it peaceful, or standing right next to people who become violent or start off one way and turn into the other. Here in the United States, and this is politically basic, so we do always want to stick with our basics, and I love talking about the law as it relates to this issue. We have a very simplistic statement in the First Amendment about our right to peaceably assemble. We don't have a lot of details about what that covers, right? And there are people who could argue or justify other actions, saying that maybe it was peaceful when it wasn't, or, well, it wasn't my fault that it wasn't peaceful because XYZ. What do you see happening with regard to lawlessness and either a regard or disregard for the law when it comes to some of these protests that are turning violent?
Well, you make an excellent point that the law is vague. And funny you should say that. It's something I've been working on for literally the last year, and I think I've been way too slow in it because there's so much other stuff that's gone on, is what I want to create is a protester's rule of law and of responsibilities. So these are your rights and these are your responsibilities when you protest, right? And I want to have authorities and advocacy groups, activists, to all agree to this, right? And it's a set of basic principles, right? The idea that, number one, people need to be judged as individuals, right? So the fact, again, like I said, if you're doing something bad, you should be judged for it. Number two, it should be ideologically neutral. It doesn't matter if it's BLM, neo-Nazi, Trump, Tea Party. I mean, it doesn't matter what the rally is for. You should be judged based on your actions, not based on whether the prosecutor is a Democrat and maybe wants to go after conservatives, or a conservative and maybe wants to go after Democrats, right? Like that's unacceptable. It has to be based solely off your actions, which has not happened, right? The police are responsible for facilitating peaceful activism and responsible for having zero tolerance toward any form of riot or violence or vandalism, right? But protesters should know that they should be protected for their display of their First Amendment rights. So one challenge all of this goes into, Kyle, is that the law is so vague. So there's been a lot of politicization, right? I've heard criticism both from left and right. Like my conservative friends say, well, they went way softer on BLM than they did on January 6th, right? But now a lot of people on the left are saying, well, look at the cancel culture as pertains to the Palestine protesters, right? That they've been expelled or deported, right? And to me, I feel like all of them are in a way correct, where what we need is just consistency. And in a country where we have the right to express ourselves, what we really need is consistent rules on actions, not on speech.
I do hope you create that, Adam. I think that's brilliant, because it's protecting people's First Amendment right at the end of the day. Regardless of which side you fall on, people should be protected in exercising that right. So I think that you're on the right track there. And you brought up two very different riots I was going to ask you about anyway, which was the George Floyd BLM riots and January 6th. Yeah. Two very different groups of people participating, two very different actions during the protests and riots, and two very different outcomes. Now, you could say that the George Floyd riots and what happened in Minneapolis, that people who were rioting and protesting felt that they were certainly heard and seen. And then you have a January 6, 2021 scenario where I think there's still a lot of questions. If I'm just being very honest about it, I'm not sure anyone really, truly, clearly understands what happened on that day, who the players were, who the instigators were, if it was natural, if it was inflamed. I would love your perspective on those two, but particularly what you think happened on January 6th.
Well, if they want, as a pretty objective person, I'm not a liberal or a conservative. I've left the Democratic Party years ago. I've worked with both. I will happily investigate January 6th. If they make me special prosecutor, I'll get to the bottom of it.
Maybe we should take you up on that, actually.
The truth, Kyle, is that there's not ever been an objective investigation of January 6th. There's only been politicization by both sides, right? Of course, you have the Democrats who are eager to use it for their political ends, right? And similarly, on the Republican side, they're eager to sort of exonerate Trump and exonerate, the MAGA people and kind of the premise. And there's never been a truly objective look at it by somebody who doesn't really have a dog in the fight. That's why I'm offering you heard it here. I'm offering my services. I'll get to the bottom of it because frankly, I understand how these things work. I've heard the theories about, infiltrators that could have been right. Number one, so there are a few things that could be the case, and maybe all of them are the case. Number one, you can have outside agitators, right? So there are agitators who attach themselves to BLM, and they may have attached themselves to January 6th. These are apolitical psychopaths. They just want to burn down, right? So they see any opportunity where they think chaos is going to happen, and they just attach themselves. They wear the black masks to protect their identity, and they just want to break stuff, right? Because they're psychopathic people, right? So it doesn't matter what the cause is. The cause is window dressing, right? So there well could have been those people, right? Obviously, there's the issue of whether this was pushed by certain law enforcement entities, right? Sort of a setup, entrapment kind of situation, right? And of course, George W. Bush was the king of that. With Muslims, right? I mean, I hate this entrapment thing that they do where they take someone who's got a very low, oftentimes very low IQ, and you get them to, you push them to do really stupid things, and then once they do something that's illegal, you arrest them for it when it's like you really were the one who instigated it. So I hate that law enforcement does that, and I think it's wrong. It doesn't matter who it's used against. Biden used it against conservatives. Bush used it against Muslims. I have no idea. I hope Trump will put a stop to this practice, but I don't know if he will. But so that concerns me. So there. Those are the two big issues to get in front of: is who did what and who planned what. Right. So what I would want to see in all of that is I would want to like dissect it by every single participant who was entered the Capitol, who they were, what were their motivations for being there, what they did in the course of being in the Capitol, including whether they commit violence, did they commit vandalism, did they urge other people to do things? Were they trying to calm the situation down? Like, I believe in individual justice, where each person should be looked at individually as what did they plan, what did they do, what did they instigate, right? And what did they diffuse? And I don't think either party has really shown an interest in doing that, but I am very interested in doing that because I honestly want to know. And I really don't care whether it vindicates or not, Trump or the Democrats or whatever. I just want to know.
Yeah. Well, I'm here for it. Adam Swart, special prosecutor, and maybe you can look into the Butler, PA rally. I thought that one was pretty highly suspicious.
To look at, well, I mean that's also very suspicious, but that's more of a law enforcement matter, so that's probably less in my wheelhouse. I mean, in terms of the protests, is something I know a lot about how they're funded and how you can fund something kind of anonymously. Actually, one issue I want to touch on is this anonymous funding issue, right? So it's like, hey, how do you fund something and have no one know? The answer is it's actually very easy if you're rich, because you can just set up like 3, 4, 5, 6 layers between you and the person protesting, which, by the way, if it's protest, that's totally legal. Like, I have a lot of clients who say, hey, because of cancel culture, whether right-wing or left-wing cancel culture, I want to have as much distance from whatever it is as possible, and that's totally legitimate. It's called anonymous free speech. The Supreme Court protects it. Where what is not legitimate is using those same vehicles to protect yourself from illegal activity, right? So I'm an expert on this stuff because I know how to do it from a legal perspective to preserve client discretion. But you can also use that from an illegal perspective, to break the law, and that's a big problem.
Gosh, fascinating. I have so many questions for you, and I don't have enough time to ask them all of you. I just quickly kind of want your take, Adam, on what's happening across college campuses. Those seem to be organic. They don't seem to be funded, but that's just a layperson's take on what's happened. You're a UCLA guy. There was certainly a lot of anti-Semitic feeling and looking types of protests and issues going on there, across all the way to Columbia had a really bad problem. What do you see happening there when it comes to college campuses and some of these rallies that have really, truly gone off the rails?
Yeah, I mean, there is money behind it. I mean, there's also, like, a lot of the way that I would look at it is the money is less clear, but it's through academic programs. Like, a lot of these people demonstrating are like, they're like a fellow for like the XYZ Institute, right? And part of the job as being a fellow is to actually attend protests. So are you a paid protester if you're a fellow and part of your job is to attend a protest? Like, yeah, you are. Like, my way of compensating people is actually a lot cleaner, because we're like, hey, do you agree with this cause? Yes. Okay, we'll compensate you to attend something you otherwise wanted to attend but couldn't, right? Whereas something like this, it's a little bit more opaque. I mean, to be sure, there are a lot of students that are on both sides of the issue. I mean, both sides of the issue have a ton of money behind it. especially, I mean, I'm referring to the Palestine issue. Let me just say one word about college administrators. Truly, some of the most pathetic people on the planet. They're just very weak-willed, spineless people. Because what's happened is that what this Israel thing kind of did is it caught up to them, right? Because what's happened is for the longest time, these college administrators were like, okay, I'm just going to give the lefty students whatever they want, because that's sort of the easiest thing, right? But then they got met with a counterforce with this sort of pro-Israel donors, right, who were like, no, 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 you better not give them what they want, or we'll withdraw our funding. So then these guys are so weak, they're like, oh no, which is the easier step, right? And like, you have angry students on one side, and you have wealthy donors on the other side, and these guys are like, they're impotent, right? They're truly impotent. I think you might have to be impotent in order to be a college administrator, because you have to make so many kind of these compromises, and you're just always giving into the squeakiest wheel. And it's really a sad thing, frankly. I mean, I'm talking even more in California or the elite colleges. I know there are some people who might have defied that in other colleges. And now I think colleges are understanding, okay, maybe we've got to switch things up. But even then, that's only because the donors are making them do it.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's more just like, okay, instead of kowtowing to the students, they're kowtowing to the donors, right? And it's like, okay, you just got to have to, again, if they just adopted my idea of responsibilities and rights, here's what we allow from the protesters, right? You can protest on the quad every single day if you want, right? But you can't protest at 3 a.m. outside a dorm, right? You can protest outside classrooms, but you can't deny Jewish students the right to go to class, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like an unreasonable to say. It's not an either or. It's like, it's not like, oh, we're going to not let them protest or we're going to let them take over campus. It's like, come on, guys, like, you can figure out a degree of nuance to say, hey, let them protest. So, but I totally disagree with the Trump administration's thing about the deporting the student activists. I mean, unless they're doing something violent, like, come on, let's not deport people for thought crimes. That's a very bad precedent.
Well, yeah, I like your ideas because it's pretty logical. I mean, you've got to abide by private property and, college or university rules. It's almost like when you see on a cardboard box the stamp that says "Do not eat." It's sort of like, okay, let's be reasonable here. Like, let's just apply some reason and logic to some of our protesting. But I think that's a really smart idea. Your company offers mediation support. Maybe you can explain that, because I think it can get a little confusing for people to wonder if you are providing the crowd to move a narrative or, push forward an opinion. And then you're saying, hey, we're going to step in also and mediate between two sides. So how does that work?
We probably wouldn't mediate our own issue, although I guess we could. I mean, we haven't, that hasn't really come up necessarily. Typically, it's when we're not otherwise involved, because otherwise there's maybe like a little bit of a conflict of interest there. Typically, when we've mediated, it's when we're not retained by either party, right, or any part of the groups, because then we can be objective. Like I said, I think I'm a very objective person. There's no one more free speech, but I'm very pro law and order. So, like, if you want something that balances free speech and law and order, I can often, using my protest experience, help people unpack how do we actually let these people speak, whereas allow law and order, right? Because a lot of times, like, I've been in so many negotiations with police officers, high-ranking police commanders, who are like, oh, can you guys just go like 2 blocks that way and protest? If it's a convention. I'm like, guys, like, no, we're not going to do that, because we're protesting this convention, so we're going to be right outside where we're protesting, as we have a constitutional right to do. So, thanks for the offer, but no thanks, right? So, but we're not going to break any laws. So, like, I'm pro law and order, but I'm very much like, hey, the government doesn't get to tell me where I protest, right? So, so I think there's a balance there.
Absolutely. Gosh, Adam, fascinating conversation. I know that we kind of just scratched the surface here, but I think we also learned so much about not just what you do, but how this whole arena of gathering crowds and helping people be more effective in having their voice heard on issues that they care about. So I thank you tremendously for coming on the show today and just sharing all of this wealth of information and your very insightful opinions on these issues too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kyle. This was a blast. Anytime.
Thank you, sir. Well, I hope you'll come back again in the future.
Absolutely.
Well, and thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic, where we break down the basics of all political issues and let you decide. Be sure to follow us at politicallybasic.com and at politicallybasic on all socials so you don't miss a single episode. And we'll see you next time.